Thanks, Emily. In the early 20th century, electric power became the main driver for North Carolina's industry, and utilities companies took their place as central players in that whole economic development process. While technologies, industries, and companies have since come and gone, electricity remains crucial to the state and its businesses. The ability of our utilities to offer affordable, reliable, and environmentally sound power continues to sharpen North Carolina's competitive edge. Good morning, everybody. I'm Ryan Nance with North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives here in Raleigh. I co-chair NCEDA's Professional Development Committee and have the honor of welcoming everyone to today's event and moderating today's panel. As we do before every NCEDA event, we want to recognize and thank our annual sponsors. You'll see our Cardinal, Longleaf, Dogwood, and Patron sponsor logos scrolling on the screen right now. The support of these companies is vital to NCEDA's ability and to offer these professional development opportunities just like this one this morning. So again, can't thank the sponsors enough. And guys, a lot of exciting news keeps rolling in. Many of you saw last week, Site Selection Magazine revealed the results of its annual survey of corporate real estate executives. Our state fared well, tying Georgia for the top spot as the best state for business. That survey also asked the current short list of factors sought in business destination. You guys know these. Utility costs and reliability ranked number 7 behind the perennial considerations of workforce, taxes, and transportation infrastructure. It's impossible to take energy out of the site selection conversations, just as it's impossible to overstate the value of utilities in North Carolina's economic development leadership. So joining me today are representatives of our state's key utilities, Duke Energy, Dominion, Electricities, and I'll be representing the North Carolina Electric Cooperatives. So between the four of us, we've got the map covered. Let's start out with quick introductions, and what we'll do today is allow each of our panelists to kind of do a brief overview of their companies and teams, and then we'll get into a panel discussion. First, we'll start out with Mr. Bill Roberts, Senior Economic Development Manager for Duke Energy. His accounts include manufacturing, healthcare, public schools, and municipal governments in Western North Carolina. Bill joined the staff of Duke Power back in 1982, and I believe he's our only engineer on staff today. So if we get into the 201s and 301 technical questions, no, we'll probably end up defaulting to Bill. Next on the list, we have Mr. Richard Imel. He's Manager of Strategic Economic Development for Dominion Energy. Richard and his team support business development projects with a specific focus on data centers, advanced manufacturing, and food and beverage production. Rounding out the panel, we've got Carl Reese, Senior Economic Developer for Electricities of North Carolina. He works on economic development projects in some 70 public power communities across our state. Carl has been involved in economic development since 1995, and prior to joining Electricities, he was Economic Development Manager for the City of Greenville. So now on behalf of our NCEDA Professional Development Committee, let's get started. And I'll kick things off with a few slides to help frame out today's presentation and discussion. And if we could, Emily will get us over to those here. And again, this will be a quick kind of 3 to 5 minute overview from each of the utilities. I'll kick us off. And really the main points here that each of us will touch on is an overview of kind of where we serve, the resources we have for economic development, and just to get a better handle before we get into the panel discussion. So again, on behalf of North Carolina's Electric Cooperatives, happy to be here today. Emily, if you want to go ahead to the next slide, then you got to love maps, guys, and you can't, it's hard to go anywhere to start but this. So when you look across the state, we're touching 93 counties. We've got 26 different local cooperatives across the state, from Cape Hatteras all the way to the Great Smoky Mountains. That's about a quarter of the state's population in terms of serving electricity, and almost half the state's land mass. So certainly, our history goes all the way back as nonprofit cooperatives to the farms back in the 1930s and 40s when, the cities were getting power, but the farmers came together and got power out to those rural areas. And while we do primarily serve rural North Carolina, you guys know the state has grown substantially over the years, and many of our cooperatives serve quite a few suburban markets as well. So I think a point here is as nonprofits, and I think what's unique is you have a bit of a different business model from each of the four utilities today. From our perspective, we're a nonprofit, and really our local cooperatives look at what is really best for their community. In some cases, we'll get behind projects that they won't even provide the power for a particular site or building, but they can help with some financial resources. And that's kind of the bigger picture that we look at. If our communities are growing, if our state is growing, then we're all going to be in a better position. Emily, if you forward to the next slide. And real quickly, I put this map out there as kind of a preface to the resources that we can bring to bear. You guys don't have to remember this, but if there's anything to take away, it's just give me a call. Resources vary across the state between our cooperatives. Some have really robust revolving loan funds. Others have access to different resources. So you see, 2/3 of the state, we have our participating members, and the further west you go, you get into some of our independent members. Y'all don't have to remember that. Just know that any questions, give me a call, and we can sort through what resources we have based on the project and opportunities that you have going on. Emily, next slide. And this is going to be it for me right here. You see a lot of these programs and grants and loans here. Most of you are familiar, or at least have heard of the Red Legs, and Eddie Miller left a strong legacy here at the cooperatives in helping channeling that USDA federal money. And again, the end recipients, whether that's your county, municipalities, whether it's a direct business loan, they're all loans. There has been some confusion in the past about Red Leg grants, and really the grant terminology is relevant for the cooperative, the local cooperative lending the money. If it's a grant to them, they simply add that to their revolving loan fund over time and can grow that balance. So I'm not going to get into too much of that, but again, currently Red Leg can go up to $1 million, 0% interest, 10-year term, and you can defer that for up to 2 years. Next, you'll see member loans for our 20 participating members, and that same terms as Red Leg, except we can go up to $2 million on that. And again, that's evaluated on a case-by-case basis. Our local cooperatives, with our support, doing necessary due diligence and supporting those economic development projects that you guys have. I mentioned revolving loan funds earlier. Again, this is over time. So you guys have heard how cooperatives have been very active in loaning money for rural fire departments, schools, emergency safety vehicles, a long list of things. I mean, walking trails and other community projects. When those were in the form of grants, that's how these revolving loan funds have been built up over time. And some of our cooperatives have substantial resources with their revolving loan funds. In many cases, a very small interest rate is applied, usually around 1%, and that's to help cover just the administrative costs of managing that loan over its life. But again, another point of give us a call, and we can talk about what specific resources we have in your geography. A little further down the list, I'll skip down to our matching grants program. Again, this is relevant for our participating members across mostly 2/3 of the state. And those are the targeted grants that we can get behind product development marketing, strategic planning, master planning. Those grants are typically small, in the kind of $3,000 to $5,000 range, but in some cases, a very compelling project and a strong need in the community, especially when we're leveraging resources, or you as economic development practitioners are leveraging resources, that can go up to a total of $30,000. Again, needs to be a compelling project. We'll evaluate it on a case-by-case basis, but that's where we as a statewide organization are matching dollar for dollar what our local cooperative is willing to do. And again, they are the leader, and we're in a position to support that lead there. You see the last 2 points, it probably goes without saying, electric infrastructure and broadband infrastructure, and really that the last point, in-kind work, and I may have mentioned this on a previous webinar, but we've had situations where you get a short notice site visit from a prospect, and you know, the site may have used to look good, but it's had some overgrowth come in. We've had cooperatives step in on a short notice basis and get out there with some bush hogs and clear a site to get it looking good. So just, again, whatever it takes, our cooperatives want to help. They're deeply embedded in the communities. And really, it's just an honor and a privilege to serve and support our 26 cooperatives each day. So last point we can get into it is rate resources. Similar to Duke Energy and others, we can go up to 5 years on an economic development rate, depending on certain parameters of that prospect. If it's over 60% load factor, if they're adding over 400 kW, then we're most likely in the game right there. Won't get into details, but here's our contact information. Myself, if you can't get a hold of me, Brenda Steen, and we still have Eddie Miller as part of the arsenal. He's kind of our USDA specialist and really helping facilitate those red leg grants and loans. So with that, I want to get Carl teed up right here, and he can give you guys a taste of Electricities and a little bit of overview and the resources that they can bring to the equation. So without further ado, Carl, if you want to unmute and hop on board.
Thanks, Ryan, and good morning, everybody. And really thanks to NCEDA for putting this on. It's a great opportunity for all of us to get information out about our various electric utilities and the work that we can do to help economic growth in North Carolina. So next slide. All right, so a little bit about Electricities, who we are and what we are. We're over 50 years old. We consist of a little more than 70 public power cities and towns in North Carolina. And what does public power means? That means that the town or city is responsible for providing the electricity to their customers, whether those be industrial, residential, retail, commercial, etc. All combined, we have over 1 million residential, commercial, and industrial customers. We are actually divided up across the state into really 3 categories. We have agency members in an eastern agency and a western agency. And in those cases, Electricities helps manage the power supply on behalf of those members. Some of those members actually own percentages of generating assets. Simply put, that means they own part of a utility plant, of a generating plant. And in other cases, we help them to manage long-term power contracts. We also have some other cities like Kings Mountain outside of Charlotte or Fayetteville who are public power communities, but we don't necessarily assist them with securing the power that they provide to their customers. Next slide. Get a little bit of a sense of where we are across the state. We are all these towns and cities, the little blue squares, the little green squares, and the white squares. The white are what we call those associate members. We don't necessarily help them with management of their power supply. The blue are the western agency, the green are the eastern agency, and there's quite a diversity amongst these towns. I've highlighted in the east the little town of Hamilton in Martin County, who has 262 customers, very important customers to them. And then somewhere like a High Point that's in the more urbanized triad that has something like 40,000 or more customers that they're servicing. And as you can see, we have a pretty strong distribution throughout the state. We don't get deep into the mountains. So somewhere out there around Forest City, Morganton, those are kind of the westernmost reaches of our membership, but then we're pretty well spread out through the rest of the state. Next slide. This is our team in economic development. We have a 4-person team, and I know a little bit differently perhaps than say Duke. We do a lot of different things in economic development for our members. And I'll go through our staff and then talk a little bit about what we do. You'll see going from left to right, Brenda Daniels is the manager of economic development for Electric Cities. She has been with Electric Cities for a long time. I'm sure all of you know Brenda. The next gentleman is Jennings Gray. He works on our retail and commercial side, as does the woman next to him, Charity Barbie. And then of course, I'm on the far right. Brenda and I work primarily on the industrial side. I also do a little bit of urban revitalization work with some of our cities, but we primarily work on industrial projects across the entire state. Neither one of us is assigned a particular territory. We take projects as they come. Charity and Jennings in the middle are a little bit different. They actually do a tremendous amount of retail and commercial development with our towns and cities. That is something that we have heard from them over the years that is very important. And so as you can see, we essentially put 50% of our human resources into that endeavor and work closely with them. So if that is something that is important to the jurisdiction that you represent, or you have more questions about that, please do contact us. You see our contact information there on the screen. Next slide. High level, some of the services that we provide, we do a lot with our communities on helping them figure out what their assets are and how they should market those assets. Do a lot of industrial recruitment these days, mostly virtually and digitally, but normally speaking, we go to a lot of trade shows. We go on a lot of missions in Western Europe and in North America, reaching out to the business community in those places and selling the assets of North Carolina public power communities. We talked about the retail and commercial recruitment. We treat that the same way. Our retail staff fans out across North America trying to find opportunities for retailers that are expanding and make the cases why they should do that in our public power communities. Rate analysis is very important. Won't go into a lot of detail, but if you heard what Ryan said, we have similar capabilities. So please do contact us as you have projects that you're developing, and we'd be happy to assist with that work on behalf of the public power communities. Economic development planning and advisory services. We do a ton of strategic planning on behalf of our communities to help them develop a roadmap that will take them where they want to go in terms of economic growth and expansion. And then we have a variety of grant opportunities. And what I'd say about this, although sometimes we wish that these were very, very large dollar figures, they're typically on the smaller side, maybe $5,000 or $10,000. But they can be very helpful to close the gap on some local initiative. And so please contact us as you're developing various programs and projects, and we'd love to help. Next slide. I've been with Electric Cities a little over 5 years, and I would say that the greatest point of emphasis that I've seen with us and that we've worked on is product development in our public power communities. We do that primarily in 2 ways. We recently initiated a program called Site Assist, where we will actually help you along with consultants working on our behalf to find the best, the most ready sites within your community and think about what it would take to bring those online. And then as we find those, or perhaps you already have a site, we actually go through a very, very significant and detailed process to understand the site readiness of that site, and then actually to certify that site. And that site certification is very, very close, for instance, to what the state of North Carolina's program is for site certification. And so it's not much more of a high hurdle to go from our certification, what we call our smart site certification, on up to the state level. And for our agency members, those were the little blue and the little green dots. So if you are squares, if you represent one of those communities, there is no charge whatsoever for either of these programs, and it is a substantial investment. And so we're already talking with some of you. But if this is something that is of interest to you, please do reach out to us, because we believe that having that product ready and available to market is one of the most important things that we can do on behalf of our public power communities. Next slide. I'm not going to get into too much detail about this, because we're going to have a Utilities 101 segment that Bill Roberts from Duke Energy is going to go through. But the point I wanted to make is that we always have, as economic developers, we're always so anxious to know how many jobs, what's the capital investment going to be, how big is the building going to be. And sometimes we forget to ask some of the other details about power. In other cases, you may be like me. I'm not an electrical engineer. I don't come from an electric utility background. I was an urban planner that converted some years ago to working in economic development. So it may be that you don't quite feel like you know what questions to ask. But the key thing here is that understanding what the customer needs in every area, including electricity, is very important. I'm sure, like the other members that we have here today, the other speakers today, have some kind of easy peasy forms that we can provide to you that you can give to the customer to garner information about this. And then just something simple that I often use, because you may be talking with a company with somebody that is not necessarily an electrical engineer or an operations executive. Maybe you're talking to a CFO or somebody like that, sometimes an HR executive. You can ask for electric bills. If they have a similar facility in, say, New Jersey, and they're trying to replicate that here, you can just ask them, hey, do you have any electric bills from your facility in New Jersey? And that can help us immensely in trying to look at what their rate's going to look like, how much power they need in the particular building or site that they're looking at. Next. So with that, I'll close out the overview. I know we'll be back for questions, and I hope you all have some great questions today. You see my contact information here again, and please, at any time you have a question, please do reach out to us. Thanks.
That's great, Carl. Appreciate that overview for electricities. And with that, let's get the mic over to Richard at Dominion. And Richard, if you could come on with your video and your microphone, then take it away, man.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Good morning. I'm Richard Imel, Manager, Strategic Economic Development for Dominion Energy. And as mentioned earlier, I oversee our Virginia and North Carolina electric service territories. So, we're charged basically with looking for new customers, and then, having existing customers expand in those two areas. But just wanted to cover a little bit on this first slide of, Dominion Energy, Virginia and North Carolina. Really just some facts about, transmission. 6,700 miles of transmission lines. On the electric distribution side, we've got a little over 58,000 miles of distribution lines. Overall, if you add up what we have in Virginia and North Carolina, we're looking at 2.6 million franchise retail customer accounts. Utility generation, we're at really 19,900 megawatts of capacity. And we have a balanced and diverse fuel mix, which keeps rates low for our customers in both of these areas. So next slide. And this slide here is really, you'll see kind of colors dispatched throughout the state of Virginia as well as North Carolina, and those are the areas we serve. So if you look at North Carolina, we're predominantly in the northeast North Carolina area, and just to kind of throw some office locations in there, we have offices in the Outer Banks, we have offices Elizabeth City, Ahoskie, Roanoke Rapids, right off the I-95 corridor, and then further south, we also have an office in Williams. And just in Virginia, we're heavy up in Northern Virginia, Metro Richmond area, Tidewater, and then we have some things around south side, western parts of the state. But I kind of wanted to highlight that. And then we've also on our economic development website, we've got a service area locator. So a lot of areas we serve are kind of blended, where you've got Dominion as a utility, and you've also got cooperative kind of mixed in amongst us. So this service area locator, you can, which the link is shown here on the slide, but you can go to that site, and you can actually kind of zoom in on a map, and you can get pretty close to determine, does Dominion Energy serve this property, or, could this property be served by somebody else? And, it kind of provides good guidance. I would say if there's questions as to who serves the site, or it's not uncommon for, sites to potentially be split where, you've got service area of a co-op and Dominion Energy on one large site, to reach out to us and the co-op, and let's have some discussion about, who could potentially serve the site. So next slide, please. As far as economic development resources go, I know it's been mentioned a few times, but rates are critical. In North Carolina, we have curtailable rates, we have time of use rates, we have real-time pricing rates, and then we have standard large commercial industrial rates for customers. But when we start looking at unique rates, which are the three I listed here on this slide, it is critical that we get good electrical information from the potential prospect or customer looking to expand, and that goes as far as load factor, peak demands, ability to curtail, and so forth. All that information allows us to really take a look at rate options, and we can certainly run rate analysis, but we need to know that information so we can make sure we're putting you on the most optimal rate. A lot of times, a curtailable rate, or if risk isn't a huge factor, a real-time pricing rate, can provide significant savings, which if the power user is using enough energy, could be a big deciding factor on getting a customer to site in your area. Also, on the rate side, incentives, we've got rider EDR North Carolina, which is an economic development rider. It's basically an incentive to get customers to site or expand in our service area. It's a 48-month rider, and it gives 10% discount on load and energy usage for that period of time. As far as, there are some qualifying factors for that, minimum capital investment of $1 million, and then we look at full-time employees added, so we're looking at 75. But I would say this is an incentive that can be a deciding factor as well. So for the local EDOs or partnerships, if there's questions as to whether someone qualifies, or you want us to get on a call and discuss some of this, please reach out, and be happy to do that, and provide some guidance there. We also offer site selection assistance, and we get a lot of questions about how much capacity can this location serve, or what are nearby facilities, what's the closest distribution or transmission line. So we work with local EDOs and counties to identify sites that have good power stories. We can provide reliability reports. If a certain prospect's looking for X number of acres, and they need 10 megawatts, we can go into our GIS system and quickly look in a specific area and determine we have this many sites, and we have this many sites adjacent to distribution facilities, and we can serve the customer pretty conveniently at these locations. Or it may be a situation where a local EDO or county's looking at a location that doesn't have the best power story. We prefer to have that discussion up front as well. So I would say, if you have available sites and you're marketing them, check in with the utility routinely and just confirm what is the power story here. So a lot of times we'll give out information, and we may give it out, and we could have given it out in 2019, and then something big could happen in that area, and then 2020 heading into 2021, that story may change. So if you're actively marketing sites, just make sure you're in touch with the utility. We can certainly provide up-to-date information. The other thing we're doing, I could go back one slide, please, is the lead generation piece. And that's, a lot of times we work with local EDOs and partnerships, and we might work a lead together. A lot of times it's coming from the state or maybe the locality itself. On the lead generation side, what we're looking to do now is we're using a third party, and as the utility, we're looking to generate leads in our service territory. So, we look to reach out. We may have a prospect looking, for 100 acres, needs a couple megawatts worth of power, but they also have a significant need for water and some other items. So we would, work with like I said, local EDO partnerships, to try to drum up, a list of sites in these specific areas that, would be good to pitch to this customer. So, trying to send leads back the other way. A lot of times they come to us from, like I said, the state, but we're really out trying to generate things on our own. And then, we'll be reaching out as, leads come in that, we deem are viable. Next slide, please. So this is just really an overview of the economic development team. So I've kind of already covered myself here, but Stan Blackwell's Director of Customer Services, Strategic Partnerships. So Stan oversees really the economic development team for all of Virginia, North Carolina, and then he also oversees large commercial industrial customer accounts in the Virginia area, predominantly up in Northern Virginia. But I wanted to mention that because the way we're structured, we align with our key accounts team. We work with them, pretty closely. A lot of times on an expansion project, they may be aware of it before we are. So, we're always talking, communicating back and forth. And then we've got Giselle Chopneau handles, she's an economic development marketing specialist, really Central Virginia, South Side. Brian Smith is the economic development manager, which handles the Carolinas. And he's been working that area a while. So I'm sure y'all know Brian. And then we've got Blair Pritchard, Senior Economic Development Market Specialist up in, really handles the Northern Virginia footprint. And that really covers the slides I had, just as far as a little background. So at this point, I guess transition back to you, Ryan.
Thanks for that, Richard. And again, we're going to dive deeper into some of these issues right here. See, we're already at 10:32, but last but not least, let's bring in the big dog, Bill Roberts from Duke Energy. Bill, if you want to unmute yourself, bring on your video. I think, and we're going to roll right into your 101 as well, man, but feel free to grab the mic and
Okay.
And take it away, Bill.
Okay. Thank you, Ryan. Why do we do economic development at Duke? There's a lot of reasons at the end of the day, or why is it important and how do we impact it? The biggest thing, John Geib is fond to say, at the end of the day, the most important thing we do is provide low cost, widely available, highly reliable, and increasingly green electricity. And, concerning electricity, Duke Energy never wants to be the reason a client doesn't choose a Duke served site. Next slide, please. So this is the Duke Energy team. We're led by our VP, Stu Heichman, but everybody in North Carolina knows that John Geib is the man. Next slide, please. We're on that previous slide, we're divided up into groups. We do have a business recruitment team that generates leads, and we have a committed site readiness person too. But this is the North Carolina territory. In the east, in the yellow, is Donna Phillips. In the RTP area, and just south of there is John Nelms. In the Triad, it's John Geib. The blue in the Charlotte area is Tammy Whaley. And I'm the minion in the west, I like to say. So moving on. What we do at the end of the day is we provide a company benefit to Duke through increased revenue, and we provide a community impact by creating jobs or helping create jobs and capital investment. And those are just some of the numbers of our statistics from 2019. So let's move right along, because I know you want to get to hear me talk about V = IR squared and all those important algebra things. So electricity 101, why? Well, your job as a local economic developer is to help clients successfully expand or relocate their business operations to your community. So to do this, you must have a very good understanding of the details of your site, all the issues, and then you have to be able to get answers to all the questions that candidates have. And most of the time, or just about all the time, they have a utility question. So how does all this start out? It's sometime you'll hear a site consultant or somebody just say, I just need 50 megawatts. And then they don't tell you any other details. Well, this is not the most accurate way to get information about a site or even to get a rate estimate. So we need more specifics, and several folks have mentioned some of the information that you need. But the two things that we need the most to make an accurate power cost estimate and really determine the best method of service is demand and consumption. And sometimes consumption is called energy. or is referred to as energy. So if you'll move on. So demand is the average rate of energy consumption during a specific time period. And typically at Duke, that's either 15 or 30-minute intervals. And we use that in almost all billing and cost calculations except residential. But for just about all the time, it's used in the bill, and you have to pay for that. I like to think of demand, or I find it helpful to think of demand as kilowatt hours per hour. Okay, so that's algebra that your algebra teacher said you would use one day. So I just want y'all to, I like to point that out. 1,000 watts is a kilowatt. 1,000 kilowatts is a megawatt. Next slide. Consumption or energy is the rate of energy consumed over time. Meaning for how many hours, basically how many hours energy or your demand is used. So 1 kilowatt used for 1 hour is a kilowatt hour. And normally we think of consumption at Duke as a monthly figure, but it can be represented as an annual number. We just need to know that. We don't need to know that a customer is going to use 3 million kilowatt hours. So you sort of need to know what that time period is. So let me give you an example as we move through this. So and I like the 100-watt light bulb example, although there's not nearly as many 100-watt light bulbs in use as there used to be. But a single 100-watt bulb left on for 10 hours will consume 1 kilowatt hour. I know everybody got that, but I'm gonna say it again. So a 100-watt bulb for 10 hours, that's 10 times 100 watts, that equals 1,000 watt hours, or 1 kilowatt hour. Okay, so we got that, 1 kilowatt hour. 10 100-watt bulbs.
Bill, I'm going to jump in right here. I forgot to warn these folks, the infamous John Gobb exam on Electricity 101, everybody's going to have to take this after this webinar, right?
Absolutely. And as a matter of fact, if you don't pass, you have to listen to John Gobb do this presentation.
You can't be an economic developer in North Carolina and not have exposure to that. But sorry for the interruption, Bill. Keep on rolling, man.
That's all right. It's a tough test, and I'll be happy to send it to anybody. And I can promise you, if you don't respond to the test, you will get a phone call from the professor because he follows up. And but it's a good test. And all this information that I'm going over is available on our website at duke-energy.com or considerthecarolinas.com. But back to my example. So I had a 100-watt bulb on for 10 hours. That's 1 kilowatt hours. But think of 10 100-watt bulbs left on for just 1 hour. That also consumes 1 kilowatt hour. Think of that as 10 bulbs times 100 watts. That's 1,000 watts times 1 hour is 1 kilowatt hour. However, in the first example, okay, the demand is 100 watts, less than a kW. In the second example, it's 1 kilowatt or 1,000 watts. So the demand is 10 times higher. But they both use the same amount of electricity. Okay, so that's important because in order for us to figure out how to design the system and what we got to build and how much generation we got to build, everything, it all gets back to that capacity number. And we're going to get charged, or the client or the customer is going to get charged significantly different in the second case or significantly higher than the person in the first case. Okay, so next slide, please. So these are some of the questions that or some of the issues at later stage. If you need to advance, if the design is to advance, the utility will need this information. Secondary critical information, such as ability to interrupt. What are your operating hours? A lot of times, if you don't know, if all they tell you is I'm going to be 2 megawatts, and you don't really know how much electricity they're going to use, if they can tell us how many hours they're going to operate. And that's typically, we do that by shifts, right? 24/7, 24/5, 2 shifts, 5 days a week. A lot of that can be used to help us to come up with a number called load factor, which is also shown out there. We're going to need to know your build out schedule. A lot of customers that get back to that 50 megawatt example. You used to hear that a lot with data centers, but that's probably the year 5 or year 6 number. what's the year 1 and the year 2 number. So you know, you need all those kind of things. Power quality, what kind of reliability requirements do you have? Are you going to be starting any large motors, things like that? We sort of need to know to design our system. And then the next slide is this sort of gets into, or this is actually about method of service. And when we say method of service, it typically refers to which part of our electrical system you're going to be served from. And I'll discuss the difference between transmission and distribution on the next slide. However, I want to point out that just because a site has a transmission line on the property, that does not mean we will use that line to provide service. And I believe that's true for all my other partners. Is that right, Ryan?
You got it, Bill.
Okay.
You do.
So just want to know that. So all these factors I've shown here come in to determining how a customer is served. The last one being probably one of the more important ones, the last two. But finally, the last slide that I have, moving on, is the grid. I wanted to talk about this briefly. It's a big part of the presentation if you go online and do it. There's a lot of good pictures of all these things. But basically, the way I cover it with middle schoolers is electricity supply is about generation. You make the electricity. Transmission, you take large amounts of bulk power and you move it across the state or the region or the country. And then finally, distribution is how the power gets from your local substation to your home or business. And what you're seeing here in this picture is a generating station on the left, a transformer that typically we say steps up the voltage to something very, very high, 500, 230, 115,000 volts, a transformer in a substation that changes it down to a distribution voltage, which is anywhere from 4,000 volts to 24,000 volts, or 4 kV to 24 kV. And you see the poles with the cross arms and the wires going across them. That's your distribution system that takes it to your homes and businesses. And then usually there's a transformer and sometimes a substation in the customer's facility that serves the customer. But that's the end of my presentation, and I apologize for moving quickly, but we want to get to your questions.
That's great, Bill. And we'll probably have to go rapid style with our panel questions. But in case anybody in the audience is get confused, I think the point of this was for Bill to just show at least a layer 1 of that technicality. So we just don't come into the conversation as, well, just give us a call because you figure it out. I mean, I think we're all in this together. And all of you guys know the extreme example of, especially when a large project is led by a consultant, and even within that company that consultant is representing may not have good communication with their own engineering and energy team. And then from that consultant to the state, to the region, to the county, to the utility, you can easily count half a dozen, if not more, exchanges or layers of communication. And we all know what happens when we do the classroom exercise of whispering in a ear and see what happens when you get around. But just really the key questions, and I'm glad Bill set that up. And that really gets into our first panel question today, guys, and some good ones that came out of our professional development committee and some local developers. Point blank, how can I find out who serves the site? And let's just go to Carl on this one if you wanted to start us out in terms of communication and finding out who serves the site. And then Carl, I don't know if you got your mic on or not. Man.
I do. Yeah, so thanks, Ryan, and good question, and a couple high-level things to start with. First of all, there are some processes to figure this out, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But for buildings and sites that you are aware of now and that you are marketing, let's work in advance to figure that out if it's an unknown, if there's a question about it, as opposed perhaps to it's Tuesday and I have to have this information in an RFI that goes back to the site consultant on Thursday. Because sometimes there can be a little bit of level of complexity. Also at a high level, you've got some road in some county or town somewhere here in North Carolina, and there's some electrical wires running down the side of the road, and you're pretty sure those are Duke. That may mean that Duke Energy serves that site, may not mean that. The reason for that is that back in 1965, through some legislation here in North Carolina, the state was divided up into electric territories. Well, that was a long time ago. 55 years ago, I wasn't even born yet. If you think about 55 years ago, North Carolina's population was about 4.8 million, and today we're probably about 10.4, 10.5 million. We have grown a whole lot. So back when everything was divided up, I'm guessing it was fairly apparent. You could look out there and go, wow, this is really rural out here. This is the EMC. Dominion's down here in northeastern North Carolina. That's where they are. The cities and towns have their own electric, and it was a little different then, but now today Duke had this. And so it's probably fairly easy. Today we've grown. A lot of these systems have expanded. Municipalities have incorporated new areas and annexed them. And so everything is a little closer to one another today. There are some clues. If you are one of the 70 plus public power communities in North Carolina, and you can go to electricities.com to see a list of those communities, and the site or building that you're looking at is within the city limits of the town, that's a pretty good clue that that town or city probably serves it. If you are located in one of North Carolina's largest cities, if you're in Charlotte, if you're in Durham, Raleigh, if you're in Wilmington, the odds are pretty good that one of Duke's two corporate entities more than likely serves it. And if you're way out in rural North Carolina, the odds are you're probably served by an electric membership corporation. But nonetheless, by contacting any one of the three of us, we can determine that for you. And so that's my suggestion, whether it be sort of a long-term situation where you're trying to figure that out for some marketing, or even when it's, spur of the moment and something's come up. Contact one of us. You now have names and numbers and emails for all of us. Please give us a call and we can help you determine that. But sometimes it takes a little bit because there are some gray areas and some ambiguities to who can serve where.
Yeah, Carl, that's perfect. And just a quick note to the folks on the webinar and really the whole economic development community out there. What we're going to do as utilities is put together a simple spreadsheet on a county by county basis. If you're in XY County, then you can pop a simple email and you can copy all of us on it, say who serves this property, and give us some idea of where it is, whether you got a map, whether you got an address, and we'll get back to you. We'll have that on NCEDA's resource webpage, and Liz will have a follow-up on that once this is all over. Moving on here, and Richard, let's switch over to you, and some of these might get just some quick technical questions that may not take long, but we've got some of our members that have asked, important considerations for electric infrastructure when identifying new sites. What are the advantages of maybe having a substation nearby? Is bigger transmission always better? Questions along those lines, if you wanted to chime in.
Sure. So, I think when looking to identify new sites, I think it's important that, localities working with the utility that would provide electric service generally need to know who the target is. Is it a 800-acre site they're looking to make a mega site, or is this a couple acres that they're looking to, get a site ready in an existing industrial park, but need to confirm, power availability, what voltages are available. Is there power to the site? If there's not, what would it take to get power to the site? As far as having a substation nearby, it's, that generally is going to create a stronger power story. If the site is fit from a substation that's, 18 miles away, there's not always the case, but that site could be prone to more power quality issues, potentially outages. So, I'd say the closer the substation is to the site, the better for the electric story. As far as our bigger transmission lines, better. Most customers aren't going to be served off transmission, so in a lot of cases they're almost a complete non-factor. But for significant customer loads, bigger is not always better. I know for 500 kV, we won't interconnect a customer to it. We've had a lot of discussions where somebody, purchased or wanted to start marketing a site because they thought it had transmission on it. Well, it's 500 kV, so that's not always helpful. 230 kV and 115 kV, if it's a significant enough load, those normally create good power stories. So, I would say check with the utility. Let's see what is available at the site, and get the, reliability story. We can provide that information. So, it is critical to know what you've got and, how close is it, and what are timeframes? Is it going to be a significant build out to get to the site? Because that's a key component in marketing, to a prospect, and that could be a reason that a prospect sites in North Carolina or that they site outside the state, that the time to market's not an option. They need something quicker than the utility can do. So, a lot of these discussions can be had up front, but that's really kind of the feedback I provide, right?
Nice. Good insight there, Richard. And maybe on a kind of a related note, and Bill, let's go back to you, man. We've had some questions come in on, what is the lead time in building a new substation for fast-moving projects? And related to that, how quick can you get temporary power out there for construction to start? And a lot of questions that come in that ballpark right there. So if you wanted to maybe speak to that a bit.
I can, Ryan. Typically, on the Duke Energy side, the lead time to build a new substation, and they're all fast-moving projects, I'd like to point out, is the standard answer is 18 to 24 months. Although there are local economic developers that'll commit to something a little earlier than that, to the chagrin of their transmission teammates. But the one thing to understand is that time frame usually does not include any right-of-way that might have to be acquired, or if you're getting into larger, higher voltage lines, 230, especially regulatory filings that might be required, not to even get into permitting and all that stuff. But how quickly we can get temporary power? Normally, there's a distribution line that can provide, construction trailer power or temporary building construction power. That can be done in 3 to 6 months. A lot of people ask about how difficult it is. I'm the electrical engineer, so I don't think any of this stuff is difficult, but it can be quite costly. I mean, the cost to rebuild a line, to upgrade a line, whatever words you want to use, can range anywhere from $200,000 a mile to $600,000 a mile, and possibly even higher. That's just on the distribution side. That doesn't even include, let's say you got to do some work in your substation to accommodate that line rebuild, increase the capacity and all. Then you're still arguing with over that 18 to 24 months. So the sooner you know stuff, the better. But yeah. Like I said earlier, at the end of the day, Duke doesn't ever want to be the reason somebody eliminates a site or eliminate, let's say it doesn't choose Duke served site. So we're going to do the best
for all of us in that, for sure, Bill. That's a good point. I'm going to start going rapid fire with these questions, guys, and we won't even get to all of them. But what we'll do for especially all our members out there that submitted questions, we can handle those offline, and we'll have a follow-up with that with Liz. But Carl, real quick, we had one come in about, we heard Bill speak earlier about the process and information needed just to get some kind of relevant electric rate range for a particular project. But maybe even before that, what sources should we look at in comparing costs between states if we're kind of going high level? I don't know if you have a particular source or not.
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. And really good news here for North Carolina. Our average industrial electric rates are extremely competitive nationwide. For 2019, we were looking at something like 6.31 cents per kilowatt hour. That data actually comes from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. And I will provide a link to the NCEDA team that they maybe can send out with any information that goes out post-webinar. But that is a wonderful site. You can go in there and compare these average rates over a period of back years. Their most recent data is 2019, but you can compare between states to get a sense. So For instance, if you were working a life science pharma project that was looking at maybe a Boston area, a DC, Maryland area, and maybe somewhere in Pennsylvania in the Philly area, North Carolina would stack up incredibly well, anywhere from 7 cents to a cent or two per kilowatt hour, less than the average rates in those states. So it's a great thing in our marketing to use.
Nice. Yeah, we'll include that on the follow-up. Thanks for sharing that, Carl. And maybe if we might have to jump forward here and some of our questions, did want to maybe just get a little response from all the panelists here. I mean, when you look at, there's a lot of talk of resiliency in the stance of your traditional natural disasters of hurricanes, but now dealing with a pandemic. So much has happened that's really pressed changes, I mean, not just on our industry, but I mean, the whole world in so many ways. So if any of you guys wanted to speak to any particular resource that your team's been able to come into place with reliability or resiliency in the wake of hurricanes, and maybe quickly, and how you guys have had to pivot and work with your customers that have had extreme impacts from the COVID pandemic. And whoever wants to jump on that, Richard, if you want to maybe take a quick stab, and then we'll try and wrap things up real quick.
Okay, so just as far as the pandemic goes in North Carolina, we've got a moratorium on disconnects right now, and then we're continuing discussions with customers that are behind to provide payment options and potentially credit plans. So that's a little different. I think this pandemic's certainly different than anything we've seen in most of our lifetimes, probably everyone's lifetime. But as far as the disconnect process goes, I mean, moratorium right now in the Carolina on that. And as far as resiliency goes, I'll mention a program. It's not something we're currently doing in North Carolina, but in Virginia we've got a strategic underground program where we're looking to. Well, we're not looking to. We've been doing this for several years now, but we're burying overhead lines that have been problemsome. During have created a lot of outages. A lot of times they're in rural areas. Could be backlot. Could be other reasons that they're prone to outages, but we're converting those lines to underground. So we continue to do that. That may be a program we're looking to implement in the Carolinas at some point. But that's as far as outages go, and we look to limit the number of truck rolls. So that's a very successful program that we utilized, help during basically or hurricane recovery, or it could be just a bad nor'easter or bad weather. So.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Richard. And I know each of the panelists here could talk extensively about the different resiliency resources and measures that they've had. I did want to try and get to a couple of questions that have come in from the audience, and I know we're down to our last few minutes here. Really quickly, Harry Swinson. Hey, Harry, how you doing? Any special factors to consider when with existing industry expansions versus new company recruitment? And at least on behalf of the cooperatives, we treat those the same in most cases. And again, every project's a little bit different. But Bill, did you want to chime in quickly? Does Duke do anything different in that end, or do y'all treat an expansion project as you would a new project?
No, we treat it the same way, and typically, you might want to ask, are new electric deliveries required? Although if they're expanding the building a large amount, if they're adding 100,000 square feet onto a large building, they're probably going to want a new one anyway. And normally we have a relationship with that industry that also can help with getting information. So most everybody has an account management team of some kind that can help a local economic developer outside of even the folks on this call.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Ryan, I would add, even for existing industries that are not necessarily in expansion mode at the present time, we have a business services team that goes in and works with them to see if there's ways that they can be more efficient and have some cost savings. And we're constantly circling the public power communities across North Carolina doing that work. So again, if that's something, if you have an existing industry program and an industry is talking about maybe their lighting or some other component of their process is not as efficient as it could be, please contact us. We'd love to have our business services team come in and consult with that industry.
Oh, that's great. And I see we just hit the 11 o'clock hour. Carl, thanks for that last point right there. I hope folks heard that. For the other questions that came in from our members, we'll handle these in our follow-up email from the webinar, along with that spreadsheet on a county by county contact for each of us as utilities. But if I could, I'll close out by just thanking all of our panelists here and their valuable guidance. I know we've kind of only been able to scratch the surface on some of these issues, but today's conversation is a really starting point for our members and a learning process, as always, and that's every day. We hope NCEDA members and guests found this beneficial. Our thanks again to annual sponsors and their year-round support for professional development programs like this. Otherwise, we hope you guys will join us Friday this week. Again, a Zoom call for lunch and learn webinar to discuss last week's election results. The prominent political scientist, Dr. David McClellan from Meredith College, will discuss national and statewide election returns and what they might mean for economic development policy and the business community. You don't want to miss it. That's Friday, November 13th from noon until 1 o'clock. So again, watch for your email from Liz. She'll have additional information. In the meantime, stay connected and stay confident, folks. I hope everybody has a great rest of their week. Thank you.